much for joining us on this show, Davos Debate, all very, very big leaders of India, Inc. The question that I want to ask each one of you, we'll go around the chairs here, is that, is there an India story to sell at Davos? And if there is, what is the story you've sold? Let's begin with you, Mark.
I think, the India story is known to everybody. It's nothing new that is happening. I think there's clearly, where India is positioned compared to other countries in the globe. I personally believe India has a comparative advantage. One, because of the domestic market, the population, and the growth potential that lies there. I also see the government having taken some significant measures, and hopefully the start of many more that will come. So I think now it's about execution, it's about people investing, whether it's domestic investors or foreign investors.
It's interesting to hear India keeps talking about execution. I think reforms have been done. The idea is really to implement it. What is it that you have told clients you've met here? Were you more confident speaking to them than you would have been 4 months back?
I guess you're right that some of the corrective or catch-up measures that have been taken, whether it is, getting rid of ghost, or whether it is about starting a dialogue with the industry, or trying to encourage FDI to come in at least a few select verticals. Yes, I can say that India is back on the mend. But overall, I can only say is that I love what Malvinder has just said, that it's not about India's story anymore. The fact is that world recognizes that the population shift has happened and it will continue to happen. That in Africa will be a huge population, India will be a huge population, and that China and the rest of Asia would be a huge population is now given. And that for any business which wants to be global or international has to keep India as part of the equation. Now the point here is very simple, is that are we going to discuss strategy or are we going to discuss results? To me, the clear message is from India Incorporated, corporate world is, let's walk the talk, let's be consistent, and let's not change rules of the game mid-course.
Sure enough. Is that what you agree with? I mean, both these gentlemen say execution is the key, implementation is the key. Sentiment boosted, yes. You've done the reforms, yes. But you've got to just now walk the talk.
I fully agree with you, because there is a huge, enormous domestic market and demand is there. And no global company can afford without India. So that is a must they require. And they also believe in the growth story of the long term is intact, because potentiality is very high. Only what we have to bring for them is the high credibility and consistency in policy framework, and to deliver the execution of the projects and delivery. So if that is achieved by our country, I think I don't see the concern for any global investment in India, whether it is in direct FDI or whether it is in a capex investment. It is a huge potentiality there. 2-3 segment is country need lot capital, like in the infrastructure sector and power sectors. Both is required, and we have to bring that comfort and confidence for them to continue to invest in India.
Malav, you spoke about the credibility. Before I switch gears and talk about the global economy, India, headwinds and all of that, I want to ask you this question. Do you think 4 months back, if Davos were to happen in, say, July of last year, would you have missed it? Because what was the story you would have sold? We did not even have the reforms. We had the worst policy logjam. We had a government that was just looking away from decision making. Do you think you're far more confident today, 4 months later, and our credibility somewhat getting back on its feet?
Well, let me look at it differently. I'll tell you what we need to continue to do. We need to make sure we're able to hold inflation, but more than that, bring interest rates down and make sure investment happens. When industry is making investments, be it in manufacturing or service or infrastructure, you will create jobs. And then they will have enough money or additional money to keep spending. So we need to get that growth momentum going, and for that you need to make investments attractive from a fiscal perspective and from a monetary perspective. So yes, government has a fiscal deficit, they need to address that, but you need to bring interest rates down, you need to, and there is enough money sitting globally which is wanting to come into India. It is coming in. It's more than what it was earlier, and I certainly believe in 2013 you will see more of that come. And I think personally for us in our business, in Relegate and in Fortis, we've increased our resource allocation into India. We're not looking that much outside today, but there's a lot more into India, investing in both our businesses to grow those in India.
You know, I'm tempted to get a global economy question here on 2013 being a global turnaround year. Let me actually get to that question to both of you, and then we can go around the table on that. Like he said, you know, the government has to do this. This is what needs to be done. Do you think 2013 in a lot of ways will be a turnaround year, not just for global economy, but for India, for the emerging markets? Will we see that turnaround happen this year? Because look at the Davos summit, for instance. Last year, I remember it was all plagued with concerns of Europe. Will Europe survive as a single zone currency bloc? It has. US beginning to get back on its feet. Is the worst behind global economy?
I think, Supriya, more often than not, we are human beings. It doesn't matter whether you're a head of a state or a head of a company. We don't like to be pessimistic. And that's the reason if people say 2013 is a turnaround year, or, you know, the crisis is over in Europe, I think we are just about trying to look for a silver lining. Take into account what has really changed. Has the US fiscal deficit reduced? Has public spending reduced in many of the countries? And if it is reduced, will austerity drive growth? And if it cannot drive growth, what is changing on the economic equation? So, in my opinion, it has to be more for the world economy to realize that the economy has really shifted. And that economy, if Malvinder is today saying he is investing more in India, there is an underlying message out there. The underlying message is, it's not that Malvinder does not like to build a global company. He is saying that's where the consumption is. So, unless all of us in the global world recognize that the world economy has shifted, we need to reprioritize. I think we are just about chasing a tail out here. And I personally don't think the turnaround is going to happen.
Do you share that pessimism?
Problems are there. And I think it's much easier for, like what he was mentioning, for companies to move markets, to move businesses, to move resources. Governments and politics can't do that.
That's right.
So the challenge, what is the issue today? The issue is about taking political calls across different markets. But businesses don't look at it like that. We are not bound by countries. We are bound to do what's best for our stakeholders and our shareholders, and whether it's manufacturing or services, you know, move those around. And it's much simpler and easier for businesses to take those calls. So are businesses in issues today? They may be limited in terms of what they can do, but there's far more maneuverability and flexibility to move between countries and continents. And that's what everybody's doing. So yes, I continue to see Europe being a challenge. I think America is out of the woods, but they have their own set of challenges like we do in India. But there is also enough opportunity sitting there. So I think the world recognizes the emergence of Asia, the emergence of the Asian countries, India, China, a bunch of the ASEAN markets, where growth is happening. But in absolute numbers, it may not be as large as the West, but in incremental numbers, it's very large. And it will keep growing over the next many years. So I do see those shifts, like what was being mentioned, happening and continuing to increase.
I'm going to come back to you because I know this is the first time ever anybody actually heading the healthcare, the debate here in Davos, a non-European, non-American. I'm going to come back to you because I know you are. But just to come back to you on this whole bit, like Malav said, you know, there is far more maneuverability as far as businesses are concerned. Would you say the same about yours as well?
The global economy, in particular US and European Union, is a two different, I don't see the much change has come, but more the sentiment has changed, I can say like that. Because fundamentally and structurally there is no change within 1 year is possible. The second is the Indian economy is no more much high influence because of the global economy. Because we have a home ground, robust economy is there for the domestic demand. Because our domestic companies are not too much depend on the globe. With 200 billion exports, it's not too much impact is creating. So I think we are quite de-linked there. It's not much more impact is there. If we really concentrate on our home ground and make a more sustainable growth on the domestic thing, we can bring our economy best way. There is no doubt about it.
We were talking about embracing Asia. Congratulations, A, for being the first Asian to be heading the healthcare bit here. A lot of people, when Davos started, thought that India is dwindling as far as its own importance is concerned. They all thought that, you know, the participation is far lower, fewer CEOs are speaking on panels, fewer India-focused panels. you would want to refute me on that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I think, we don't need to go and make presentations in India. I think it's about conversation, it's about discussions which happen beyond the regular sessions in terms of where a lot of action is happening. For example, in healthcare. 10 years ago in the healthcare governors, where I was the only Indian there, when you would talk of generics, when you would talk of India, nobody would be interested. Today, it's the same global CEOs of very large healthcare companies across different segments of healthcare saying we want to be talking and doing projects and seeing what to do more in Asia and in India. Yes, we as Fortis are obviously keen to do that, but it's those guys who are on the ball, who understand it, who want it, and are wanting to drive it. And that's a huge change that's happened. And that's only going to increase with time. And it's just not talk from this side, it's allocating resources, it's putting serious money in terms of businesses, in terms of growth, in terms of partnerships, in terms of acquisitions.
I'm going to talk about the IT space with you. Everybody in the IT space, at least, the big IT guns, tech titans here in India seem to believe that we are seeing early signs of recovery. We are seeing the green shoots of recovery, if I may quote a lot of them. A, do you also agree with that? B, do you think Indian IT is now competing amongst itself, or are we really competing with the best in the world? Are we competing with an IBM and Accenture when it comes to consulting, or is TCS and Infosys still jostling for that one contract?
I think the maturity of the industry is that all of it is true. The fact is that the results speak for themselves. That quarterly results that you've seen in the last few quarters, and you've seen quarter-on-quarter growth, clearly indicate that Indian IT has come of age and the global recession cycles could not impact it because the value proposition is strong enough to withstand some of the cycles. That's number one. Number two is, I think it's a maturity of the industry that we are competing with a small shop which could be based in Spain or in Italy, that we are competing with global majors like an IBM or an Accenture or a Capgemini, or that we are competing with each other. So the reality is that, yes, it is getting into a mature stage. Now the question is, what is the next wave? Are we ready for the next wave? And in my opinion, most of us will have to reinvent ourselves. And reinvent ourselves not as an Indian IT company, but really a global international company, with global presence, not by just sitting in a client locations, but actually having our centers of excellence, our centers of technology, our centers where a graduate from a local engineering school or a local management school sees us as an employer of choice. And I think that's what will happen. Eventually, when you go to a Philips plant or a Siemens plant, you don't go around seeing only Dutch or German faces out there. Whereas if you go to any of our centers, and I'm talking of in general, you would see that we are still a very, very Indian company.
How does India sell itself to global players? I completely agree with you. In a TCS center in Arizona, I actually see only Indians. Whereas the situation should be very different. There are global companies. How do you think that's going to change? Are we perhaps not adapting to global realities as fast as we should and as fast as our companies are growing?
I think when we go the Indian company on a globalization phase, like Suzlon, today we are operating in 32 countries. I think topmost successful business model on the people front is the local management team. Because it is extremely important to language perspective, relationship with the stakeholders in the locally. It is a very, very good, important part is there. But if you see when European company or American company goes to the other geographies, they always transfer their talent to there.
Right.
That is the model they are working. And our experience is there. The local talent and local management team is really delivering the best the performance. Second thing is there when the domestic companies are going in a global perspectives, because Indian companies are more on entrepreneur approach and very well comfortable in the domestic market. That model is not workable for the international market. Each geography has a different the nature of the business styles and the corporate the management. So we have to adopt those countries adoption rather than transferring the domestic the system another. Maybe it's a good success for India.
Right.
And not
the same
suitable for
overseas.
Canada or US or Brazil. So you have to go with that. Even China is completely different.
Interesting. You do a lot of business overseas, big chunk of your business there. How tough is the challenge to localize business? You've got to make it attractive to people there, but you still want it to have a very distinct, definite Indian imprint. Is that true? No? Or are we just global companies?
Look, I think for us, we have our origins out of India.
That's right.
But you have to localize to what's required in that market. Today, we are in a service business.
Is it a tough job to do, though?
It's not. We're in a service business. I'm not taking a product made in India and selling it
To the world.
to the world. So you have, for example, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Vietnam, our healthcare businesses are local people. We don't have any local people from India in Hong Kong. But in Singapore, yes, there may be one or two people. But in the local team, they're not there. In Vietnam, we probably have 2 people. And that's it. But you have to be able to integrate them and make sure they understand the company culture, make sure you're able to relate to the capabilities you have in different markets, and what you need to customize and create value to provide value to that delivery system to create that service. And that's important. It's not about Indian or American or whatever. At the end of the day, it's business, you have a customer, and you need to meet their needs.
Let's go across the table. We've spoken about growth. We've spoken about the challenges. What next? The government has shown some bold, brave attitude, pushed the pedal on reforms. Nobody ever thought in this room, and I'll be very candid, I never thought diesel could be deregulated. They're doing stuff like that. So while they deserve a lot of brickbats, they also perhaps deserve a bouquet a few times. But what next? What would you want the government to do? We're looking at a budget 2013. What would you want Finance Minister to do? He could be bringing in some pain your way, though.
I think, again, let's be very clear that we need consistent, congruent policies, and we are hoping that the government of India realizes that some of the challenges this country has had, even when Dr. Manmohan Singh came in as a finance minister, those challenges are still big and really big. Let's talk about our education. Let's talk about the skill gap between what industry wants and what the education is able to provide, whether it is healthcare to the masses. Now, so the point I'm trying to make is that if we are not planning for the next 15, 20 years, and if we do not have a clear priorities, we'll continue to keep questioning on that event of the day. One day one government says FDI is good, the other government has to oppose it. I don't think that's a kind of a atmosphere any one of us wants it, because we all want to see an overall inclusive development of India.
What would you say? Do you think politics at one level has economic decision-making hostage? But like the finance minister, I think in Hong Kong yesterday said, we are seeing practical politics. People are coming together. You think he was just addressing the global stakeholders audience there, or did he really mean it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what really the country need is there. I think we required to aggressively address the supply side, because that is the biggest constraint is there. If we can address, we can address our all other problems like current account deficit, whether it is inflation, whether it is interest cost. Everything can be settled down if we really address the supply side. So for that is the 3 initiatives which the government may require to focus on that. How to encourage the manufacturing base on a larger scale basis, and long-term consistent supports for the manufacturing base, number 1. Number 2, how to attract the FDI investment in a large capital intensive the projects like infrastructure and power sector, where the long-term consistent policy is required. When we are focusing on the power sector, again it's a challenge for the finance minister, because it's more on a state level, but it's required a central and state alignment to drive that execution part on a power sector. And the 4th is important is how we can encourage the larger scale of the exports.
Right.
Because today we are addressing more on a domestic market demand and other thing. We are truly not becoming a global market access, and we are not competing in external world. So export has to go. That will support our currency issues. So this is the supply side address is extremely important to make the long-term sustainable our growth strategy.
Malav, let you have the last word. The finance minister is in the process of making a budget. There is plenty of debate out there in the space that super rich Indians like yourselves should be taxed higher. Two sides to the debate. One side believes it will vitiate sentiment. The other side believes, why not? Let's pay a little more. Some people from India Inc. do believe in this side of the debate. A, which side of the debate are you on? And B, on a very serious note, while Mr. Chidambaram gets up to present his 6th budget, I think, what would you want him to do?
I don't believe increasing taxes is the answer. At the same point, I think the many initiatives he's taken have been, are very good and have been, I think, perceived extremely well. And there also is a higher expectation from him, not only from a budget perspective, but just from the individual, to do what the country needs from a reform perspective. So I would certainly say continue the momentum on reforms, continue to push those through, get growth. In order to get growth, you need investments, you need to address the supply side issues, and you need to be able to create employment. So focus on growing the economy. When the economy grows, a lot of issues get addressed with that. When the growth is not there, many of the issues which in a way may not be totally resolved kind of come up a lot more in prominence. So it's really growth of the economy which will address some of these aspects. Everything will not get addressed. You can't do it overnight. India has its strength, but we also have our challenges. I think we need to be balanced, we need to be practical, but we need to keep moving step at a time, but in the right direction.
We're just about a year away from general elections. What are the chances it could be a populist budget, there could be fiscal slippage, there will be populism that will kick in? This is the last question. Let's go around the table. Are you worried about that?
I'm not the finance minister. I don't know.
I personally believe that we need to focus on the domestic growth and we need to focus on balancing and attracting foreign investment, right? Now, for that to happen, I think what most of us are looking at is that give very firm signals and be realistic in terms of what we can do and what we cannot do. Populist budgets have already cost us a lot of money. I mean, all the fiscal deficit, we are continuing to give subsidies that we cannot afford.
I think the budget is not a short-term point of view, it's always long-term direction is there. The first thing I will feel, whatever we have today, it should not become any surprise and no any negative things. That is very important, at least what we have. It should be, momentum should be maintained. The second important part, budget has to bring how we can attract the large-scale investment, whether it is a private sector, whether it is a PSU, whether it is a FDI investment, must required for our country. That will stimulate our growth. And third is very, very clear is the two strong initiatives for the export, which give the long-term sustainable and stability is there. Coming to our sector, particularly in the power sector and for the renewable sector, I think unfortunately in the last budget we have lost the two policy frameworks. And because of that, the current financial year, the renewable energy growth is substantially negative is there in this year. So at least that policy framework should be reinstated because we need our home generations rather than importing coal and oil and damaging the economy and increasing current account deficit and increasing the interest. Right. It's better to generate energy from our home wind. That will be the great. So
and it's clean green energy.
Clean green energy, and it is a huge rural economy development because this project is coming in rural part of country, where agriculture sector's economic growth is 3% is there. Why? Because they are not getting sufficient energy and sufficient water, irrigation purpose and other thing. And this project is catalyst to bring a lot of energy for the agriculture sector. So
I can assure you that Finance Minister is actually intently listening to all of these points being made because he is just not talking. The good thing is that finally we have a Finance Minister who's actually listening, and that should be heartening. But thank you, gentlemen, for talking to us. The biggest takeaway from this debate really is spur investment, bring growth back on the agenda, and do not bring any kind of shockers in the budget. I think the panel wanted to say the ghost of Gar. I will say it for them.